So we are recording now. As you're listening to the presentation, please do enter your questions in the chat. We do have staff monitoring the chat, and if they know the answer, they'll respond. And if they don't, they'll make sure that Maya and I hear the question at the end. So we will have time at the end. Hopefully we'll have a whole half hour. So we'll get to your questions then. Okay, next slide, please. So this time of year, I feel very privileged to be able to go and purchase my fresh produce from farmers markets, where I can get the most delicious fruits and vegetables that are straight from the land. I want to acknowledge that I am a settler on this land where Indigenous people have thrived for thousands of years before colonization. We are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And this is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This region is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands, which means that we are all treaty people and have a responsibility to look after the land for both us and our descendants. It's also appropriate to recognize that people in the region who are descendants of those who were forcibly brought to this continent as chattel slaves or as indentured laborers, and to acknowledge their past struggles, as well as our support to mitigate those struggles on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. So just as we get launched, I want to give you a few hints to make this video a little bit more accessible to you. If you like, you can turn on live transcription at the bottom of your screen. Just make sure it's on. There we go. So now you can, if you're having trouble hearing us, you can just turn that on, and you can see at the our words appear at the bottom of the screen. But I do want to warn you that it's not the best transcription. It's not an official transcript. It's just to help if you have trouble with audio. Sorry, something popped up on my screen, so I had to just deal with that. In terms of speaker view or gallery view, you probably already know this already, but if you wanted to, it might be easier for you if you just see one person, the person who's speaking, and that would be me. So in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you can change the view to side-by-side speaker or side-by-side gallery. So whatever your preference is. And then another little trick for making it more enjoyable to watch is to grab the bar that's in between the slides and the views, the people views, and just drag it over so that you have similar size slides to speaker view or gallery view. That way you can see, it's just a little bit more pleasant to watch. And then if you like, if you find it, I particularly find it hard to be on video calls for a long time and constantly see myself. So I quite often hide my self view. And again, you do that by clicking on those three dots if you hover over your own tile. And then towards the bottom, it says hide self view. And then I've already asked you this, but if those of you who came in after I asked, perhaps you could rename yourself and put your first name, last name, and the name of your organization so that we can all see who you are. So that should make the session more enjoyable for everybody. If we could go to the next slide, please. So before we start telling you about us and our community grant program grants, we want to get to know you a little bit. So we're going to be launching a poll with these three questions. They're all in one poll, so you will have to scroll down the poll once it's launched to answer all the questions. So we do ask you to please answer all the questions. Lisa, can you launch the poll? Thank you, Lisa. Don't forget to scroll down because there are three questions altogether, and this will really help us to understand who we're speaking to today. Just waiting for a few more participants to participate in the poll. Okay, it looks like it stopped moving. Oh no, it's still moving. Keep going, please. Okay. Okay, we're going to give you one more minute, and then we're going to, or one couple more seconds, and then we're going to stop the poll. Okay. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So sorry to those of you who have not participated, but what I'm seeing is a really interesting distribution. This has actually been the distribution that we've seen for most of our information sessions. So well represented across the region in proportion to the population. Quite a number of people who have not received funding from United Way before, but also obviously a majority that have. So welcome. We welcome both of you, both groups, and a distribution of quite small to medium sized to large organizations. So that's very helpful for us, and we're very happy that you're all here today. I do want to acknowledge that some of you have been funded for United Way and some of you for a very long time, so you know us well. And there will be a little bit of information that you're already aware of that we'll be sharing with the group today. But as you saw, there are quite a number of people who have not been funded by United Way before, so don't know us all that well. Okay, if we could move on to the next slide, please. So here's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you a relatively brief overview of who we are and where we are today. And then Maya and I will cover a lot of the details about the community program grants. During that time, we'll do a quick whirlwind tour of the website to show you where to find things. And then, as I mentioned earlier, at the very end, we'll reserve some time for Q&A. And remember to post any questions that you have in the chat. We do have staff monitoring the chat, and if they can't answer you, then they will raise that question at the end of the session so that you get an answer. We try to answer all your questions today, but obviously if there are some that we can't, we will find out the answer for you. Okay, next slide, please. So United Way is a charity that is dedicated to creating opportunities for a better life for everyone. We support a network of over 250 agencies across Peel Region, Toronto, and York Region that help people when they need it most. And in the past year, we've established new relationships and now reach over 570 agencies in the region. Through our network of community agencies, we deliver services and supports to help tackle poverty and related issues, including hunger, homelessness, social isolation, and mental health, to name a few. This network of agency has continued to play a pivotal role on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic and will be an essential part of our region's recovery for weeks, months, and even years to come. After government, United Way is the largest investor in this critical safety net in the GTA. However, overall, we're still a small funder. On average, we represent only 4 to 5% of each agency's budget. Different from government, we have to go out every single year and raise funds from scratch. Last year, our campaign raised over 100 million, and this year we're hoping to raise even more. We focus on fighting poverty in all its forms, and we ensure access to services for low-income individuals and equity-deserving populations. We focus our investments on supporting people who are living in or at risk of poverty, and we take a poverty lens when reviewing applications, designing grants, and in all the work that we do. And you'll hear a lot about that as we go through today's presentation. Next slide, please. So United Way is not just about funding. In order to fight poverty, we do more than just make grants. We take an approach that includes extensive, relevant research leading to advocacy on public policy issues. And we collaborate with partners in government, the private sector, and the community services sector to achieve the best outcomes for people who live in poverty. At the core, of course, is our network of agencies. And as I mentioned earlier, they've demonstrated their critical role in supporting communities during the pandemic. They distributed emergency supplies and supports and led the way in getting vaccines to their constituents. As we move through the fourth wave of COVID and into recovery, United Way Greater Toronto will continue to support a broad range of community services to address poverty through specific approaches to equity-deserving populations and issues that affect local neighborhoods. So key to our approach across all our work, all the work that we do, is to apply these three lenses: the poverty, equity, and geography. And I will be talking a little bit more about each area as we move forward through the presentation. I mentioned that we'll hear a lot about poverty, but we'll hear quite a bit about equity and geography as well. Next slide, please. We can't fight poverty without focusing on reconciliation and equity. We know that many of you, like United Way ourselves, are working on improving our ability to bring an equity approach to our work, addressing barriers for service users, as well as looking at our own organization. Our vision is that we will live in and support communities where Indigenous sovereignty is honored, where people's unique identities, experiences, and voices are valued, celebrated, and protected, and where all have the resources and social capital to ensure their well-being and prosperity. These are more than just words to us. We're committed that by 2023, our staff, board, committees, and cabinets will be more representative of the communities in which we work. We will be a more equitable fundraiser and funder. Our investments in community organizations will also be more representative of those communities. And we will help those communities to be better able to work in a way that is best for the community that they serve. Our staff, volunteers, and donors will be aligned in this direction to support unrestricted giving, which we see as the most equitable form of philanthropy. Our research convening, public policy, advocacy, and funded programs will be designed with people with lived experience to drive equitable outcomes for the people and communities most impacted by poverty. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the type of funding that we have. Community program grants are not your only opportunity to receive funding from United Way. We provide grants for a range of different needs, and from the longer-term community service funding, such as our 5-year anchor agency supports, as well as these 3-year community program grants, which is what our focus is today. We also support both short and long-term partnership and systems opportunities. Some of you may have applied for and received Allen Slate Seniors Fund money, as an example. Some of you may participate in the Inclusive Local Economic Opportunities Initiative for the Greater Golden Mile, as another example. We do also partner with other funders, government, and agencies to coordinate, plan, and convene. So as an example of that, during the pandemic, we co-led with the City of Toronto community clusters that coordinated the COVID response in community. We have a long history as well of making emergency grants, for example, during the Syrian refugee crisis. And these, of course, have never been more needed than in the last year and a half to meet the urgent needs of vulnerable people during the pandemic. And now today, we are also working on an emergency Afghan refugee fund with the City of Toronto. We are a trusted partner of government and have agreements for such funds as York Region's Reaching Home, which is a federal homelessness program, and the Toronto Enterprise Fund, a collaboration with federal and Toronto governments to support employment social enterprises. And those are just but 2 examples of our collaboration with government to get grants out to the community. Next slide, please. Now we move into what you're all here for, which is program grants. So what is a program grant? It is a 3-year funds for high impact programs delivered in Peel, Toronto, or York Region, and York Region. And by high impact, we mean programs that have real outcomes. They must provide services to people living in or at risk of poverty, or address systemic issues or the underlying causes of poverty. If you are successful, you will need to agree to our partnership expectations, which can be found on our website. And an example of a partnership expectation would be helping us with our fundraising campaign, but adjusted, of course, to the size and capacity of your agency. And we also have some fundraising restrictions that you would need to agree to. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned poverty lens, and that our programs must serve people who live in poverty, who are living in or at risk of poverty. And so you will need to demonstrate how you intentionally reach and decrease barriers to access and serve people who are living in poverty as part of your application. You will need to demonstrate how you address the underlying causes of poverty and how your program is designed to serve people who live in poverty. We do expect you to use socio-demographic data and of your own as well as external sources, and I will talk more about that later. We define poverty as a state when income is too low to provide for an adequate standard of living. But we know that poverty isn't simply about income. It is exclusion from resources, opportunities, and connections. Some of the issues underlying poverty in our region include an increasingly precarious labor market, a lack of affordable housing and neighborhood infrastructure, and a lack of neighborhood infrastructure, and systemic discrimination in the economy and everyday life, all of which makes living in poverty and getting out of it pretty daunting. I do want to stress that we are not expecting you, if you're a successful applicant, to means test clients or participants. But when you apply and when you report back to us, we are looking for socio-demographic data that supports your programs and who you serve. Next slide, please. So for the 3-year program grants, we have a few funding objectives. I've mentioned geographic distribution already. We will be increasing our investments in neighborhoods and specific geographic areas that have high rates of poverty, and we will increase our investments in New York and Peel regions. For equity, we will continue to fund a group of inclusive organizations that work with a diversity of populations and work with them to improve, and work with those agencies to improve their capacity to actively address barriers to service, including cultural and population responsiveness. We will also be increasing our investments to programs and organizations that are led by, focused on, and serving equity-deserving groups, with a particular focus on those that are led by and serving Indigenous and Black peoples. We're also looking for system solutions. We will increase our investments in collaborative initiatives or programs that are working in a coordinated way as part of a local or population-based plan, and system solutions, which includes identifying and scaling up interventions that have been proven to be effective. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, this is an opportunity for 3-year funds starting in April 2022 and going until March 2025. Each agency can apply for up to a maximum of 3 programs. The grant amounts range from $50,000 to $150,000 per program per year, but we expect that the average grant size will be $75,000 per year. So please plan your funding requests accordingly. It's unlikely that we will approve multiple programs for new organizations that have not been funded by United Way before for multi-year grants. It's also unlikely that we will approve additional programs or significant increases for currently funded agencies. So currently funded agencies can apply to sustain their existing funding for programs that demonstrate that they are effective at addressing poverty through one of our issue areas. And Maya will talk about this more, but just pay attention. Some of our issue areas have changed. So please, when we get to looking at the website and when Maya's talking about those issue areas, please note that there are some differences in the issue areas. For new or expanded, so currently funded agencies can apply also for new or expanded program that meet United Way's objectives and that demonstrate program innovation or reach equity deserving groups, underserved geographies, or address new system solutions. You may allocate up to 20% of your approved funding for administrative costs. Those have to be related to running the program. They can't be for general operating costs of the agency as a whole. And as I mentioned before, this is we're asked, I didn't mention this before, sorry. The request that you make will be per year. You will be granted this, if you're successful, you'll be granted the same amount every year over 3 years. And now I'm going to hand over to my lovely colleague, Maya, who has been almost single-handedly brought these community programs grants to you. The rest of us have tried to support her, but she's been working very long hours to make this happen. So she's going to talk to you about some deeper aspects of the program grants. Over to you, Maya.
Thank you, Annie. You're too kind. It was a very big team effort, but thank you. Okay, hi, everyone. Great to see some familiar faces and to read some familiar names. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maya Mikarowska. I'm Executive Lead of Grants Management and Data Analysis at United Way, and I'm happy to be one of your co-presenters today. So right now we'll move into talking specifically about the issue area, which is an important piece for these grants. Because the program you'll be applying for must align with one of the 13 issue areas. Organization for each program you submit a funding application for. We understand that a program may have several objectives and may fit under more than one of the program areas or issue areas, and consider the following when selecting the thematic area most suited for the program you're applying for. Choose the area that most clearly aligns with the primary focus of your program. You will be, and we know that, oftentimes a program or initiative may address, issues across various issue areas here, but we do ask that you focus on one area per one program you're applying for. You will be required to report on the results of the program in relation to the objectives identified. So ensure that reporting will be able to address the primary objectives presented in the program you're applying for. If you had submitted, so for example, if you had submitted an employment activities in a violence against women shelter as a separate program under the inclusive employment area, we would be looking for objectives and outcomes that specifically relate to that issue area. So, for example, outcomes related to employment, such as the number of people employed or something related to that, and not the results related to providing safe space for women fleeing violence. So that's just one example of how you can think about it. In terms of how we are defining a program, our working definition is that a program is a group of clear, related, complementary activities that are intended to achieve a desired outcome among the target population. We know that in the community services sector, the scale of a program can vary. A program may deliver a specific service, such as an after-school program for school-age children, or it can be a broader collection of related services, such as an employment program that also provides wraparound supports. We also know that two programs may have similar and even same objectives and may better align together in one package, kind of as one initiative in one issue area. So it's up to you to decide how you want to frame the initiative you're applying for, whether it will be, one activity or kind of a collection of activities for certain target group. Also, just to note here that we have some resources and some workshops related to program design and development, and those are available on our website. And later on the slides, we'll give you the link to that. Next slides, please. These are the 13 issue area. As Anne said, most of them are similar to our previous funding call for these grants. Some of them have evolved though, and we've kind of split up. For example, we had one that was community building and connections that's now split into a few different ones that include community building, as well as seniors, as well as settlement, and as well as food security. Because previously it was kind of the catch-all and included various different things. So now we've evolved some of them and split them up. So these are the 13 issue areas that you can apply under. And just as Anne said, if you're currently receiving funding for program grants for us, you can reapply for your currently funded program or initiatives, but you don't have to. You can also apply for any program in any issue area. Also to note here that the Social and Systems Change program have some additional questions in the application, and we're also using separate assessment area and considerations specifically for the Social and Systems Change programs. Very important here to note, and we'll repeat this a couple of times throughout the presentation, that it is very important that you go in and read the details provided on the website for each of the issue areas. We have worked very hard to develop a description document for each issue area, and each description document outlines the challenge that the issue area is trying to address, as well as our aim and our objectives and our approach, including some results we'll be looking for under each of these areas. So we strongly recommend that you read in detail the issue area description for the program you're applying for, and to make sure that you speak to the challenge and the aim and approach for that issue area in your application to ensure that there is alignment with the issue area. Next slide, please. We'll shift now and speak about eligibility. There is detailed a list of eligibility requirements on our website. We're zooming in here on a few of them that are very critical. The most important thing is that this is an open call for proposal, and all social service organizations can apply for funding. but you have to be either an incorporated not-for-profit and registered as a charity by CRA, or you have to be an incorporated not-for-profit that is not a charity, but in that case, you have to be trusteed by a registered charity that is registered as a charity by the CRA. So that means that if at the minimum you're not an incorporated not-for-profit organization, you cannot apply for funding here. This is not the stream for you. We may have other streams, but this is not the one for your organization. Also to note here, it's important that we will accept applications from individual organizations or from collaborative or group of organizations. If you're applying, as a collaborative, a lead organization must be chosen on behalf of the group, and this organization must complete the application and meet all of the eligibility requirements. If it is possible that an organization can partner on a collaborative application, even if they don't meet some of the eligibility requirement, as long as the lead organization meets the eligibility requirements. Another key eligibility requirement is that we are requiring 1 year of audited statements for the applicant, and it has to be one of the two previous years, so either calendar year 2019 or calendar year 2020, or fiscal year 2019-20, or fiscal year 2020-21. So 1 year of audited statement is required by the applicant, and if your application is being trusteed, then the trustee may meet that requirement. So the trustee will need to provide audited statements for of the previous 2 years. Also, if the applicant has an annual budget of less than $100,000, then in lieu of an audit, financial review by a public accountant will be accepted. Another key requirement is that you have to have a minimum of $2 million in liability insurance that lists coverage for your activities that will be funded, and proof of insurance will be required before a funding contract is signed. So we're not requiring the proof of insurance at the time of applications, but if you are selected for funding, we will require it at the time the contract is signed. And obviously another big requirement is that we are United Way of Greater Toronto, and we want to make sure that our funding serves people in our region, in our catchment area. So the programs have to be delivered for people in Peel, Toronto, and York region. And also the primary mandate of the organization has to be that of social and community services. So as I said, on our website, you can find a lot more details relating to the eligibility requirement, including eligible activities and eligible costs. Next slide, please. I want to focus a bit on the trustees. We've been getting a lot of inquiries on our designated email address relating to this. So as I said, if you're not currently an incorporated not-for-profit that is a registered charity, you will need to be, at the minimum, an incorporated not-for-profit, and in that case, you'll have to have a trustee that is a charity. So the trust incorporated not-for-profits with charitable status, they have to have financial systems and organizational structure to administer the grant. We will be flowing the funds to the trustee, and then they'll distribute the funds to the applicants that will be delivering the service according to an approved budget and a funding agreement. The trustee will support the applicant in terms of meeting their reporting requirements to United Way, and they will also provide additional support such as project management, evaluation, and conflict resolution to the applicant. I also want to highlight here that the eligibility requirements that are listed on our website have to be met by both the applicant and the trustee. And also that we have made some arrangements with 3 trustee organizations, and some of which are led, focused on serving equity deserving groups. So in case you don't have a trustee that you already have a relationship with, you are welcome to connect with us, and we'll connect you with the trustees that we have identified. So please connect with us on that. And as I said, once again, I want to repeat that both the trustee and the applicant must meet the eligibility criteria that is outlined on our website. Next slide, please. So now we'll move into the application. There are two parts of the application process, as outlined here. So in order for your submission to be complete, you need to complete two separate applications in our online funding system. I want to stress here that we're using a new online funding system. I know that some of you that have been funded by us previously are used to our Grants Online Go funding system. We're now moving to SurveyMonkey Apply. It's a system we've used over the last few months for most of our emergency funding grants that we provided over the last year. So we are using SurveyMonkey Apply, and we won't accept paper or email application. You have to complete and submit the application in SurveyMonkey Apply. SurveyMonkey Apply is AODA compliant system, by the way. So, so as I said, there will be two parts to the application. One is the organizational health application, which includes also some eligibility requirements and questions related to the eligibility requirements, and it should take about 1 hour to complete. And then we have also the program application, and one application would take about 3 hours to complete, and you can complete up to 3 program applications. As Anne said, you can apply for up to 3 programs, and thereby you'll need to complete a separate application for each of the programs you're applying for. Next slide, please. So this is when you go, once you click on the link through our website, there is the link that will take you directly into the system, into SurveyMonkey Apply. So once you click it, you'll get this screen where you see 2 separate windows for the 2 applications. So to the left is the organizational health information application, and to the right is the program application. And as I said before, it is very important to know that you need to complete both, and they're set up as separate applications in the system. So both are due to us on October 15th. And for the program application, you can complete up to 3 separate forms that you'll save separately and complete and submit. You can open and save a separate application for each of the programs you're applying for. And again, in order for your application to be complete, you need to complete organizational health application as well as program application. And as I said, they're both due to us on October 15th. Next slide, please. In terms of the organizational health application, we're looking for a few indicators. We're asking questions related to governance. For example, we'll ask you to attach the bylaws. We're asking you questions around board composition, board terms, how many times the board met, etc. We also have some questions related to financial accountability. We are asking for audited statements. We're also asking around your procedures related to segregation of duties, for example, or conflict of interest and so forth. Also new this round, we have incorporated some questions related to reconciliation and equity practices, and we're looking for you to demonstrate equity-mindedness. As I mentioned, we as NIWA are on our journey ourselves related to reconciliation equity, and we're inviting you, our agencies, on that journey, and are asking some questions related to that. Specifically, we'll be asking at the organizational level whether your organization has reconciliation and equity policies and practices, and whether there is representation on your board and senior managers in terms of gender parity or underrepresented groups. Also, at the program level for the initiative you're applying for, we're asking who the program is designed to serve. So we're asking questions related to ethnicity, race, gender orientation or sexual orientation, gender identity or sexual orientation for the populations you're targeting to serve. And also we're asking how people with lived experiences inform program design. This is just some examples of some of the questions we are asking. Also important to note that if your application is trusteed, if you have a trustee, the organizational health assessment must be completed by the trustee as well as the applicant. So both the trustee and the applicant need to complete separate OHA applications. There are some trustees that may be exempt from completing the organizational health application. So please connect it with us and we'll provide more information and advice, next steps related to that. Next slide, please. This is the assessment criteria each of the reviewer will use to assess each of the application. Since we are asking you organizational questions, health questions, as well as program questions, we will be assessing the organizational overall capacity to deliver the program as well as the specific details of the program. The 5 assessment areas we will be looking at are alignment with our focus on poverty, equity, geography, as well as alignment with our focus in each of the issue areas you're applying for. We will also be looking for applicants to make compelling case for the need, as well as to demonstrate good program design. We will be looking for demonstrated impact. We'll also want to know how the funds will be used, how NIOA funds will be used. And we will assess the overall capacity of the agencies to deliver the initiative and to ensure that donor dollars can be stewarded in the most effective way. In terms of who will review the application, they will be reviewed by our staff as well as volunteers based on the considerations listed under each of the assessment areas. So here we have listed the assessment areas, but on our website you'll find more details under each assessment area. So we list the various considerations we'll use under each assessment area to assess your application. So keep in mind this consideration that the reviewers will be using as you complete your application. Also important to note that as I said, in addition to staff, volunteers will also review the application, and volunteers are recruited from the community, and we make sure that there is representation in terms of the communities that we serve. So there is representatives from the geography that we serve, there is representatives from equity deserving groups, as well as volunteers that have expertise in the issue areas in which we're inviting applications. So that's it for me. At this point, I'll turn it back to Anne to do a quick demo of the website. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maya, so much. Questions are coming fast and furious. So some of them we're going to have to hold until the end of the session. But I'm trying to write them down so I don't forget them. And of course, my colleagues are also monitoring. So we will answer your question if we can. Just please be patient with us. Okay, I am just going to share my screen and I'm going to do a quick whirlwind tour of our website so that you can see where to find information. Can you see the website? Lisa, can you see the website on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is the landing page, and even though I had nothing to do with it, I'm actually super proud of this website. It's very well laid out, very clear, and very easy to navigate. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but there are a few things I want to show you. We have this neat little section here that gives you some advice on how to plan your application. Throughout, the biggest piece of advice that we have for you is please, please, please read the website. Everything is there. And if you then still have questions, then do come back to us and we'll give you the email address and the phone number to contact us at the end of this session. So when you're planning your application, we highly recommend that you first review our priorities and approach. And we have talked about this in this session. So they're all here, taking a poverty, a geography, and an equity approach. And then how we're trying to solve poverty through a multitude of issue areas. And I've also talked a little bit about the other things that we do. So back to the landing page for the program grants. I also want to show again that Maya mentioned the issue areas. And if you click on the issue area link, then it takes you to this page. And you'll see all 13 programs are listed here. And each one is in an accordion. So you click on the plus sign here, and it shows you, as Maya had mentioned, the challenge, and then followed by our aim and approach. And every single issue area is designed in exactly the same way, with the applicant applied apply in this issue area button right at the bottom. That if you clicked on that, it would take you to our SurveyMonkey application area. So every accordion has the same structure, but every accordion has different information for you. And so our advice is to choose the areas that are most relevant to you. You can read all 13 if you want to, but my advice would be to choose the areas that you think you fit into and then check it out. Make sure that read the challenge and our approach and our goals and see if that does in fact fit with what your program is all about. And then back to the landing page, I did want to show you a couple of other things. You see number 5, it says review the application questions. So these are PDFs of both the org health assessment or the org health application and the program grant application. So strongly recommend that you read those first before you get started so that you see what information is required. And the more information you collect in advance, the faster it will go when you actually log on to the website. Maya mentioned the application deadline is October 15th, coming up really quickly. And she's mentioned these other dates as well, so I won't go over them again. Another neat little thing, accordion down here with, answering some questions. And one place that I really want to take you to is how can I get more information right at the bottom. Obviously you're at an information session, but here it's the frequently asked questions are here under how can I get more information. So if you click here, it takes you to another page and we have yet another accordion file with lots of questions. So you should be able to find an answer to all of your questions in the FAQs if you haven't already found them in the other parts of the website. The other thing is Maya went over some eligibility criteria, but I wanted to point out to you that there are also ineligibility criteria. So things that we will not fund and types of expenditures that we will not fund. So important to look at those too. I'm not going to go through them now. I just wanted to show you where to find them on our website. And so here they all are. And I think I would, yeah, I can't access it right now. I was going to put the link into the chat, but I can't access it right now, but I'll do that momentarily. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to show you on the website. So Lisa, if you could take us back to the PowerPoint presentation, that would be excellent. Are we there? I'll just stop sharing my, oh, there we go. Excellent. Thank you so much, Lisa. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Okay. Sorry, folks, I seem to have a slightly different version of the slide. No. Oh, okay. Reporting. We wanted to advise you, if you're a successful applicant, we will require you to report at the end of May of every year annually, and we will be asking you to include organizational indicators and program results. We've been getting some questions about this, so we added this slide in. So, next slide, please. So now I'm going to launch into some application tips, but before I go there, we want to hear from you because almost all of you have probably submitted grant applications. Some of you may have received feedback on those grant applications. So in the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing one tip that you have for your 100-odd colleagues who are on this call to help them with their grant application. So please add it into the chat. And I will read them off as they come in. I won't be able to read all of them. Oh, get somebody to proofread your application. Very good advice. Thank you, Rita. Answer the question. Start as soon as you can. Yes, do read the guidelines and please go to our website. Everything's there. Keep going, folks. You're providing some excellent advice to people. Yes, a friendly evaluator to help you with the design and monitoring strategy. That's very self-serving, Janet. Start early, yes. Yeah, proofread, always a good idea, whether they're familiar or not. So if they're not familiar, they're more likely to catch things that don't quite make sense. So that's not a bad idea. Oh yes, save a working copy of your application in Word. You can also download your application from SurveyMonkey. Strongly recommend you do that when you're finished. Grant writing team. Use plain English. Yes, acronyms are not great because not everyone who reads your application is going to understand your acronyms. That's a good idea to establish your budget early on, because then you're writing to the budget rather than the other way around. Okay, well, keep going. Other people can read what's in the chat. I appreciate all your tips. Now I'm going to give you some of ours. If you could go to the next slide, please, Lisa. So you can apply for both an existing program or a new program or initiative. If the program is new, please be sure to emphasize the evidence that you have to support the program design. Oh, and by the way, a new program is one that has not previously been in operation. If you've piloted your program, then it's an existing one, and you should include results of the pilot in your application. If you, there will be a number, we are only going to fund a limited number of new programs, and we'll be looking at a compelling case and a proven model with very strong emphasis on strong program design backed by evidence. And I'll talk a little bit more about that next. Programs can be delivered in partnership with a lead agency as the applicant. The applicant has to be eligible, but an agency that is not considered eligible could be part of the partnership. It just cannot be the lead applicant. And please ensure that you include demographic and geographic data to support your program model. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a bit more about evidence. We do expect you to provide evidence that comes from both your internal resources as well as external resources to support your case, to show that you are serving a population that is part of our focus, the poverty focus, and to support your program design. Does the design meet the need and support folks to overcome their challenges? The internal and external data that you present should support and complement each other. And as an example, if you are applying for a program that serves a particular neighborhood and your internal data shows that 75% of your participants are receiving Ontario Works, and then you support that with census data that shows that 3 out of 6 of the dissemination areas in your neighborhood had median incomes of less than 18,000. So your internal data is supported by your external data. Please do cite the sources of evidence and the year that it was, if it's external research, the source and the year that it was completed, because we do want to see that it's relatively up-to-date information. Don't forget to include the impacts of COVID on your population, that you'll find some external data that does show some of the impact of COVID, but more importantly, the impacts of COVID that you've seen amongst your population in the last year and a half. The evidence that you provide us should be current, it should be verifiable, and it should speak to the social and economic issues that affect people that you're working with and your specific geography. And as I said, don't forget to include the effects of COVID. Somebody asked about income. If your participants are not comfortable revealing their income, then that's fine. We're not looking for them to tell us what their income is. We would be more interested in external data that shows what the median income is in the geographic area that you serve, or the individual places within that geography, as much as you are able to obtain. There are some regions that have less of a geographic breakdown than others. So we do acknowledge that there may be some external evidence that is hard to get. It is important to be specific and give the actual evidence. Don't just tell us the source of your data or your research. So don't just say things like many of our youth are unemployed. Instead, perhaps you could say, according to StatsCan, or maybe according to the City of Toronto, 25% of youth are unemployed. Okay, if we could go to the next slide, please. So I mentioned having a compelling case. Bear in mind that this is an open call and we're expecting a lot of applications. So the more you tell us about why your program is the one to fund, the stronger your case. I think storytelling is extremely powerful in terms of giving us or making your case compelling. Tell us as much about your program as you can, but bear in mind that there are some word limits on the questions. I think for most of the answers around the evidence, you have up to 300 words for each answer. Okay. We expect you to demonstrate that the duplication of service is not occurring and that the program is part of a service continuum or network. So as an example, you might work with similar service providers in your region, such as welcome centers, shelters, or counseling agencies, to ensure that you're not duplicating services. And then describe in more detail how this works. Like, do you have regular meetings? Do you just exchange information? Do you co-create the programs for your region? And be clear to emphasize the differences between your program and others that are operated in your region. So you might be meeting different needs, or you might be targeting different populations, or you might be targeting different neighborhoods, in which case be clear about that. Even if you think your program is completely unique, please describe what services are similar to what you do. Telling us that you're the only service for a particular demographic group, like saying we're the only wraparound supports for teenage parents, as an example, is not an adequate answer. And we ask you about needs, so be sure to cite specific evidence that you have that demonstrates the need for this program. So have you done a survey? Is it anecdotal? Lots of your participants have told you this. Make sure you tell us why you think that that there's a need for your program. Next slide, please. So just a few tips about program design. Keep your objectives short and clear. Be specific with your program activities. So tell us exactly what you're going to be doing in order to accomplish the goals or the objectives that you have laid out. Justify these activities if it's an existing program or even a new program, using past experience and past program evaluations, as well as evidence reviews or best practices that you're finding in the literature. And link the program to the needs of your clients' participants. I've mentioned that before, but it's really important that we want to see that you've actually come up with a program design that is specifically to meet the needs that you have identified. And I think good program design is critical, not just to get funding from us, but also for the success of your program, but more importantly, for your clients. We do have some resources on our web page about program design, and we will share the link with you at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier that program impact is about intended outcomes. What will change for your participants because of your program? We only want you to include outcomes that you can collect data on. They can be quantitative or qualitative, and you can identify multiple levels of outcomes. So they could be at the individual level, the family level, the community level, the systems level, or even for the agency level. And you can identify outcomes in multiple timeframes as well. You can achieve short-term outcomes as well as intermediate and long-term outcomes. We do ask you to describe your most recent results related to these outcomes, and that would be mainly for existing programs. And also, if applicable, if your intended results were not achieved, please tell us why. We also ask you to describe your program's evaluation activities. How have you used evaluation findings, and how will you use evaluation findings? So as an example, you can tell us that you conduct a pre and post evaluation with all participants, or that you conduct a satisfaction survey annually, or that you hold discussion groups twice a year with clients, and that you find out what is not working and what is working. And then you tell us how you use that information to improve your program design. Next slide, please. Okay, moving away from the content of the application to the mechanics of the application. So Maya mentioned we're using SurveyMonkey Apply, also referred to as SMA. This is a new system that we started using last spring of 2020 for the Emergency Community Support Fund, and we find it very user-friendly and very easy to use. If you have an existing account, you will need to know who your primary administrator is and have them log in, and then add you as a user or as another administrator. We do recommend that if your primary administrator is not currently the executive director of your organization, that you actually change that so that the ED is the primary administrator, because all of our communications through SMA go out to the primary administrator. So when your reports are due, for instance, it's the primary administrator who would get that information. And I think it's a far better best practice if your ED be that person. If you don't already have an account, then you have to set one up, and the creator of the account becomes the primary administrator. So again, I recommend that you get your ED to set you up on SurveyMonkey Apply, and then he or she can add all the users that are going to be working on the application. It is important that you add the staff that are working on the application to both the organization itself, and then when you open the application to start completing it, there's a space where you can add members to that application. So they have to be part of the organization first, and then you have to link them to the application second, so that they can help you with completing it. And we do recommend that you do add staff. We highly discourage you from having one login and username and password. It's not a good practice. Okay, we do have lots of tips that we've put in the application to help guide you to what exactly the questions are about. So please read them as you go through the application. I'm not ready to go to that page yet, Lisa, sorry. Thank you. I wanted to emphasize a few things about SMA, such as there is no auto save. So you do have to save and continue editing at the bottom of your screen. So I recommend you do that every time you go from one page to the next, or if you have to get up and leave for whatever reason, just quickly click save and continue editing. The owner of the application is the person who has to complete it at the end. So if you are the owner, then you're the only one who will see the submit button. But before you get to that stage, once you've finished all your work and you don't want to add anything else, and somebody has proofread it for you and double check that all the questions are answered, then you have to mark it as complete. That doesn't mean it's been submitted. And in fact, even if you mark it as complete and then it goes to a second reader and that person finds things that need to be edited, you are still able to edit it. You do have to submit it before it is sent to us and considered submitted. So as I said, the owner of the application is the person who has to submit it. They're the only one who will see the actual submit button. So a couple of things. Next slide, please. Just wanted to show you, if you make a mistake on the page, almost all of the questions in the application are required. So if you miss one, then you will get a message saying that you have made a mistake. And then you scroll down the page until you see this message at the bottom here that tells you that you either didn't complete a required question, or that you, in some cases, it might be that you put the incorrect format. So if it's a number field, you have to enter it without any characters or commas, as an example. So just a very quick tip on that. Next slide, please. There is one form that everybody has to complete that is not part of the application. It's a downloadable Excel form. You will need to download it, fill it in, and then upload it back into SMA. If your program is new, you only have to fill in one tab, which is the funding request that shows the income and expenses for one 12-month period for your new program. If your program is not new, it's existing, then you have to fill in two tabs. One is the same, the funding request tab that shows the income and expenses projected for a 12-month period for the next 3 years. And you have to fill in income and expenses for the previous year and the current year. So 2 additional years of income and expenses. So that would be, the previous year would be like calendar 2020 or fiscal 2020-21. And the current year is calendar 2021 or fiscal 21-22. Depending on when your year end is. So I'm just going to show you where you find this on the website. Next slide, please. It's right at the very end of the application. You'll see the part that's circled in blue. That is where you download the Excel file, and then the red arrow points to how you upload it. So once you've completed it, either both tabs or one tab if it's a new program, then you upload it by clicking on that button. You will have to do this before you can submit your application. Just a quick note, if you are applying for, if you're a new employment social enterprise and you're applying under the inclusive employment issue area, there are additional pieces that you will have to upload, and that is laid out in the inclusive employment application section. Next slide, please. Okay. Maya, are you taking over from here, or am I continuing? I think I'm continuing, sorry. Some of our important dates, we've mentioned most of them already, but just to remind you, the program grants launched last Monday, and they are due on October 15th. And we will be reviewing, staff and external reviewers will be reviewing everything from mid-October to early January. And then we will be making our funding announcements in February 2022. Important to note, we will not have an appeals process for these program grants. Next slide, please. Getting close to the end, folks. So we've mentioned these a couple of times. There's some resources available on our website. I'm just going to copy these and put them in the chat for you. So we have a web page that covers not just the program grants, but anytime a new funding opportunity comes available, we put it on our funding opportunities page. We've mentioned that you can find some program design and resources on the web page, and I'll put that in the chat for you as well. And we also mentioned, or Maya mentioned, good grant writing workshop that has been offered and has been recorded. And if you want to obtain a copy of that recording, please send an email to our hotline, which is cssprogramfunding@uwgt.org. And I put that in the chat. Next slide, please. So if we don't answer any of your questions today, or something comes up while you're filling in your application, you can contact us at this email address, which I've put in the chat, or this telephone number if you prefer a phone number. If you have technical difficulties with SurveyMonkey Apply, and there was one question in the chat about a technical difficulty, please send an email to cssTechSupport@uwgt.org, because they are the people who monitor that email box are the ones who can answer all questions that arise, any problems with SurveyMonkey Apply or technical problems with the application itself. They all will be answered by the people who monitor that hotline, our lovely CI Ops team. So I put all that information into the chat so that you can copy and paste it. We will answer any inquiries that come to us within 2 business days, so you won't have to wait very long to get an answer. We try to answer more quickly, but that's our commitment. And just on to the next slide, please. Just a reminder about the dates. You must submit your application by 5 p.m. on October 15th. So that is your OHA, your program grant applications, and every single one of them, if you're applying for more than one, has to be submitted by 5 p.m. on October 15th.